Welcome all to another Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare podcast episode. I'm your host, Matt Kinn, Segment Development Manager for Healthcare here at Access Americas, and I am joined by Robert Brown, a Solutions Engineer for Access. Robert, why don't you explain to the audience listening what it is you do at Access?
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Robert Brown. Yeah, the Solutions Engineer role on our Solutions Management team is actually pretty fun. We get to work with our product and solutions development teams in Sweden at our headquarters on new stuff, on existing things, really getting feedback from the real world, so to speak, customers, integrators, partners, and we bring that then to our development teams in Sweden. So I've been lucky enough, I get to work on a lot of different hardware products, but also analytics, metadata, a lot of the really cool stuff that's coming out that's living on the cameras today.
That's fantastic. And Access does bring in a lot of customer feedback when it comes in developing new products,
Absolutely.
New solutions, or expanding on the existing portfolio in general. And so you get to play with the Legos all day long.
It's fun, yeah. I love it.
Yeah, so it shows too. You're pretty passionate about it, so it's fantastic. For those of you joining the podcast series for the first time, this podcast series largely looks to have dialogue around the use of artificial intelligence technologies being implemented in healthcare workflows. We believe that having conversations, like larger conversations around the technology, really lend itself well to building a robust and nuance-based artificial intelligence enabled program. And I do want the conversations today just to kind of flow where they may, but a couple of things that I really want to make sure we get a chance to hit on, because you are a subject matter expert in this space, is what is metadata? Mm-hmm. We've talked about it before on this podcast series in general, but I don't know that we've really given it the definition that it deserves, because there are complexities with it. It's a lot of information. And then, of course, what is the new consolidated metadata that you've been working on too? So I want to make sure we get a chance to talk about that and really kind of explain to people listening what are some of the benefits, if you're going to implement and use this technology, what are some of the benefits they could expect to receive from it? And so when you look at the healthcare industry, whether it's like a long-term care, ambulatory, clinical, hospital, acute care, telehealth, whatever it ends up being, there is not a more dominating theme than the use of artificial intelligence. I was just at Vive this year. I was just at HIMSS. It dominates every conversation, and it doesn't matter what technology stack. They all want some form of artificial intelligence enabled. And when you assess the healthcare industry with all its complexities around actually providing functional care, and the fact that they're decimated by staffing shortages, or at least that's another very large theme too. It does make sense that they want to improve efficiencies of their humans that are actually implementing and providing care. So, and where we kind of seem to be plugging in as of late is on the computer vision side. So the sensor acting as a computer vision device. And those systems, they get big quick, generating a ton of data. And I think that's kind of where like the sweet spot of metadata really exists, is like enabling that sensor and making it come to life. And I think with that, maybe it would make sense if you really gave us a good definition of what is metadata.
Yeah, so a lot to unpack with metadata, and even like the use of AI. So it's just because it's so buzzword heavy. And
it is, unfortunately.
It's really easy to kind of get lost in the shuffle of AI almost as an umbrella of anything fancy that a computer can do, which isn't necessarily the case. So I love this conversation because so metadata for me is such an important part of what we're doing on our cameras and what cameras are capable of doing, which if you've been in the security industry for any length of time, and for me I realize coming up on 20 plus years.
You look good.
Thank you.
You look good. You got all your hair, which is like an interesting thing in the security. I think I'm more the norm in that category.
Yeah. But I first started working with Access cameras as an end customer literally 20 years ago. And the things that we were trying to do then, sort of big picture, are some of the same problems today, right? Where you want to find people moving through a scene. You want to get some actionable information. And so back in the day, the way you had to do that was still predicated on motion. As people or vehicles are moving through a scene. And so a lot of it was just based on like motion detection. And so that early building block is still trying to get us to the same point where maybe a handful of years ago, I think, when we launched a higher processing power chip on our cameras, we started to use metadata to be able to describe what's happening in the scene. So you'll hear a couple of terms interchangeably. I think metadata, and we have a native Access Object Analytics on the cameras. And really what metadata does, the best way to describe it, I think, is just the camera's constantly looking at a scene, assessing what's moving in the scene, and using artificial intelligence to try to figure out, is that a person, is that a car, are there colors associated with that person or that car, so that you have basically a richer set of data that you can work with. So really, the technical definition of metadata is data about data. It's pretty boring. The data is the video, and we have data that describes that video. So what I love about metadata, and what we'll talk about a little bit later on in this podcast, I know, video is pretty heavy, right? It takes up a lot of bandwidth, and especially as we get 4K cameras and more, being a responsible network citizen within your IT infrastructure.
I like that. Yeah.
I've tried to find ways to phrase that over the years to say, don't be a bandwidth hog, right? But it's the same thing.
And that happens a lot. They just crank it, and it's like, what are you doing with all that? I mean, if you need it, fine, but.
It does. And so many of what we're starting to see now, recently, are really powerful cloud-based solutions that do a lot of really fascinating AI things. Is the sort of, again, we'll talk about this more later, I know, but getting video from a hospital or a clinic to a cloud is heavy. It takes a lot of bandwidth to do that. So metadata at the core of it is a really great way to say the camera's already describing the scene in a couple of different ways. One through video, but one through a text description, basically, of, I see that person, they're walking over there, they have a gray jacket on and black pants. That metadata is a lot easier to send to a cloud provider to do something else with. And sometimes that's all you need. You don't need the video.
Well, and when you talk about color too, associated with a human being, you're talking about attributes of what their attire is associated with it, right?
Yeah. So it's a great question. It's been progression. So early days of metadata, we couldn't even do that. We are just like, I can tell that that's a person. And even if you're partially blocked behind a table, we'd struggle with that. So we keep getting better as the AI learns and has better ability to tell something's happening in the scene. So that is an attribute. Upper body color. We have attributes of lower body color. We know that you have a head. There's some interesting things like that other systems can then use.
And so when you look at, like we say, like bits and pieces of the data sets that you guys are utilizing, is there anything that you see as like a very common trait that a lot of people seem to be like implementing at scale for this type of stuff?
I feel it's people and vehicles. It's the presence of a person or a vehicle, especially like an outdoor scenario. If you're looking from a security perspective, there's typically not a lot of interest that happens in a surveillance situation unless there's a person in that scene, which is why I think it goes back to almost always like good identification of people. Not necessarily facial recognition or facial detection.
Different model.
Yeah, exactly. But just that there's a person in this scene maybe when they shouldn't be.
And then, we talk about the new ways of getting metadata out of the system. We're calling it consolidated metadata. And I know this is a project that you have spent a significant amount of time on. And so, maybe it makes sense to kind of explain what the differences are between metadata and consolidated metadata.
For sure.
Yeah.
So metadata, historically and through all sorts of sort of standards that we have, lives within the video stream. So a way that you might typically use metadata that you're not even aware of is if you're doing a search in a video management system, say a Genetec or a Milestone or even Access Camera Station. You can now search for a person in a gray jacket or a red shirt. That wasn't possible before because that metadata lives within the video and describes that scene in a way that you can do a more natural search for, right? So it's pretty cool. What we've done, and the teams in Sweden have worked really hard on this, I'd say for at least a couple of years that I'm aware of, we've worked to separate the metadata from the video stream.
Decoupling.
Decouple it, yeah. So it's a separate stream that you can get to via MQTT technology for transferring data. It's pretty standard. And what that allows for, if you can picture, I think a good Hollywood way to visualize this, where you look at a crowded scene and you see bounding boxes around people and you see somebody moving and they've got a little box and it says they're a person or whatever it is. We do that 10 frames a second in video and send that information so that bounding box knows where to be in the video. And if you have a busy scene, it obviously gets pretty busy. What consolidated metadata does, and this didn't exist in our cameras until January of this year.
Mm-hmm.
We had
Relatively new.
Really new. Yeah, we had an operating system updates that enabled this. It says we don't need the real-time painting of the boxes when we're doing some after-the-fact analysis or some event engine type things. We just need to know when that person has left the scene, and then what we can do is consolidate their journey from when they entered to when they left, and send a summary basically that says they came in at this time, they left at this time. Here's a nice little thumbnail image. We can take like a JPEG, a snapshot of them.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah.
Is it actually sending video, or is it taking snapshots?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
So it's not even taking snapshots.
So it's not that bandwidth hog we're talking about.
No. It's just a little bit of text that again has a few things about it, some interesting characteristics. We have the luxury, since we wait until a person or vehicle leaves the scene, we have the luxury of saying, here's the top 5 confidence levels we think it is, because we're never.
We have confidence levels.
We do, yeah. We're never absolutely certain. I mean, sometimes we are, but like we may see a vehicle from at distance, and me with my aging eyes, like I have the same problem. Like, is that a truck or a car? Like, I can't quite tell. It's pretty far away. I think it's a car, and then as it gets closer and I get more information, I have a greater confidence. Oh no, that's actually a truck. So we do that all the time. The metadata engine under the cameras is doing that all the time. But then the consolidated metadata has the benefit of, I know the duration of that object for the entirety of its lifetime that we saw it. So I'm more confident that it's a truck than I am that it was a car. But we share that information in the metadata along with the snapshot. So it's really pretty cool. And it's not something that is widely adopted right now, I think, even in the industry. Because we're so used to having metadata be just buried, embedded in that video stream.
And I think the decoupling is actually a huge step forward for a few reasons. I mean, so there's like a way to subscribe to that address, that sensor, where you're actually just pulling. It would look like if you were visualizing it, just lines of code.
Right.
Is that just to kind of help people kind of visualize? I mean, we all know what video looks like. We have smartphones, we have TVs everywhere. We all know what video looks like. But imagine that summarized in just text coding and just streaming all the time. And that type of summarization, I guess I would, maybe that's not the right term. It's
close. And the nice thing, so beyond even some of the other neat things about where it's decoupled from the video stream, even if it's in the video stream, if you think about how a video management system lets somebody search for video, and we're all pressed for time and we all need to do things faster and quicker. So if instead of having to search through all of the video for a guy in a gray jacket or a red sport coat, whatever it is, and you have to look through the video for that, what I have is a summary that says, here are those attributes, and started at 10 a.m. And left at 10:12 or 10:15 and 10:30, whatever it is. You've already got that summary. So now what you're doing is searching through a summary. So when we see this in practical application with one of our video management system partners or within our own, you're having like 10 to 20 to 50 times faster searches.
That's not a small thing.
No, it's not, because you've already got the summary of all you care about is when they came and when they left. And the other benefit, because I told you we get that snapshot, right? So it's not just when you first came into the scene or when you left. It's not a very good thumbnail image. So when you see the research results render in little boxes across in a grid, we can provide that best snapshot. So you actually have a much more usable little thumbnail image in the VMS as well.
So the operators are viewing the image results, but they're searching data sets with inside.
Yeah, so you don't need the video at all for any of those searches, which makes it just so much faster.
Well, I also think the decoupling of the video from the sensor data in general does lend itself well to otherworldly standards, I would say. Yeah. So I think what's important for people to understand is that a lot of these systems are being turned into multitaskers, or they're implementing computer vision systems for no security relevance whatsoever, but they want a quality sensor that's designed, it has a brain, it can package these things. It's not just a webcam that's just a USB powered whatever. It actually has a brain associated with it as an OS. And these other worldly standards may not be implementing and utilizing the same streaming standards that the security industry has been utilizing for, well, depending on what streaming abilities, new or old, but they're more social norms within the security industry. They're not in other industries. And a lot of times what we see, and in a computer vision workflow, they might not even want the image. They just want the data from the image to talk to a data lake or whatever.
Yep.
And I think a very good representation of that is what you have been doing with the Gemini framework.
Yeah.
And so could you kind of take us through what that is?
Yeah, for sure. So Gemini is Google Gemini. It is Google's equivalent of ChatGPT. So this very robust large language model that allows you to query and search for a lot of different things and ask questions of pictures or text, help it summarize. So yeah, there's a couple of different components to it, and this is really fun to be able to see it in action. And I'm glad you mentioned with the cameras. The camera's doing a lot of work already for this, and this is where like the consolidated metadata piece. It's important to understand that the camera's doing a significant amount of heavy lifting to make it so easy and lightweight to then be able to interact with like a Gemini and say, here's a scene or here's a person or a car, and I want more information about that. And that's the appropriate question to ask something on the cloud than, let's say, an edge-based camera. Let the camera understand and assess and analyze and track, and oh my gosh, I can't even begin to describe all the hard work that it is to track an object in a scene when it passes behind a wall temporarily, or you and I pass in front of each other, and all of the math that it takes to make that happen is really pretty impressive. So you take that and using some pretty standard, interaction models, interactive techniques and programming, what we were able to do was really pretty cool is just say, let me take that best snapshot of a person or a vehicle and send it to, say, Gemini. And we got a demo of this that I have built for myself and tested this. It's really cool. It's just say, hey, Gemini, I'd like to know the make and model and year and any interesting things you might see about a vehicle. Something that's pretty much impossible to do easily on a camera because there's so much data that goes into that.
Well, plus things change quickly.
They do.
And that's where cloud infrastructure really does help because they're constantly pumping it in.
Exactly. So instead of asking with, let's say, traditional metadata, sending to Gemini, all right, again, think about a 5-second path of a car driving through. 10 times a second, that's what, 50 times I'm asking Gemini, hey, tell me about this car, tell me about this car, tell me about this car, tell me about, it's nonsense, it's too much. But because we can wait until that car leaves, we can then say, now that it's gone, I'd like to know a little bit more information. And I can get that automatically. I can write some scripts or make that automated and programmable to then drop that information back into a data lake, a data warehouse, a VMS bookmark. The sky's the limit. It really, the promise is that you can connect to any system you want, any way you want to, and have it respond back with more information than the camera can get by itself.
And that's something that I don't actually think comes up enough in evaluations, is interoperability to these platforms, because that really does give you a lot more options. I mean, we see people that have been looking, and I won't say anybody's names or anything like that. We've had several that are doing this, especially that in hospitals. They want to automate their inventory taking on like shelves. I want to know, are the syringes low? Is the gauze low? Is X medication low? I want to be able to know this. I want to be able to have somebody go restock that. But I don't want them to have to restock unnecessarily. I want them to make a data-driven decision on, oh, okay, this is low, let's go take care of this. And I think that Gemini integration in general is a really good vehicle for that. And a lot of times people are utilizing a system like Gemini, so it doesn't have to be Gemini, but like Gemini, to use this for other workflows that they're already doing. So it kind of keeps the topology flat.
Yeah.
So people aren't forced to have to learn or creating like an SOP for a whole new workflow. We're already utilizing this here. Can we just add this in too? And I think that keeps topology flat.
Yeah, I agree. And it allows for, if you already have existing systems to integrate into, that's great, right? The point of this is meant to be open and flexible and easy. And that's part of the complexity sometimes, because it can be too open. It can be overwhelming to know, how do I integrate and tie into this, that, or the other. And so trying to have like demos or how-to guides or working, proof of concepts, like all of that stuff is kind of fun. I think it's fun to play around with and just say what you connect to doesn't matter. It can be some brand new technology that doesn't exist today, or it can be some existing infrastructure that you have in your business that you want to tie into.
So is it proper to call it an integration, or is it framework? What would you define
it's a
it
fair
as?
question. I like the idea of integration. It's a loaded sort of term because I have different thoughts in my mind. I've done this for a lot of years. Like there's levels of integration, right? There's really robust tied-in integration. So I would almost say this is more like a framework in that the camera does what it does well, and it's open and has ability to communicate using traditional standard IT communication protocols with some other system somewhere else, whether it's on the cloud, on your hospital network, anywhere. So that to me describes a framework, but they're also integrated pieces, right? So it lets you do more with the different individual pieces. The sum is greater than the parts. So that to me is what that enables.
That's awesome. So if I was going to architect a system like this, and like mainly for the people listening in as well too, is how would I go about building a system? And I go high level. We don't got to go like create. I mean, is it an app that you run on the camera? I mean, what is the actual piece that they need to do?
Yeah. So great question. A couple of different components of this, and I think for me again and for Axis, it really starts at the camera, is making sure that there's an understanding of what the camera is capable of in terms of generating metadata. And we have a ton of documentation, I think, that supports helping find that out. You can pretty much guarantee any camera made within the last handful of years is going to be generating metadata all the time. And if there's one takeaway from today, it's that understanding, right? Cameras aren't just insurance policies when something bad might happen.
Right.
That you need to have video, of a thing. These are, I like to think of 24-hour data gathering devices. Like they're just running and they're generating metadata, whether that metadata goes anywhere or not. So if you trust that the camera's got that metadata, then the next piece is, I think it's important that technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. You want a business reason for this, not just because it's cool and it's fun and it's neat and it's got a shiny little whistle that you can do cool things with it, but have a business purpose for it. I think you gave a couple of good examples. Wait times in lobbies is something interesting, and inventories and stocks. That's all interesting stuff. So once you have that business problem, that then helps you figure out the direction you want to take that data from the camera, and it may be something that the camera can do already. I use the wait times in a lobby. Right? We know that's an important question that lots of different customers ask of our data. So we have the camera, through our Axis Object Analytics, ability to do something that says, we're not just going to track people in the scene, we're going to track how long they are in this part of the scene, which is the waiting area. Otherwise, then you look at what other systems do you have that you want to tap into? What other questions are you trying to solve or answer for your business?
And so they're streaming to these cloud platforms then in that case. Is there like a connector, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we use MQTT as sort of a standard connection protocol. There are other ways to do that. There depends on what it is. So really the beauty is, think about, it doesn't have to be video. So I guess that's the thing.
There you go. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the video stream,
which
a year ago it probably had to be the video stream to the cloud to do any kind of additional analysis.
And when I think about, like you talked about solving a business problem, a very serious challenge that happens to hospitals is they're very siloed. I think every guest we've talked about on here, we all talk about it.
Yeah.
And what'll end up happening is Department A will go off and implement or procure a system that fits their need. They're not making a decision irrationally. They're fitting their business need. Departments B through Z potentially could benefit from that if there's some form of interoperability. And it's a really nice way to show value to the greater organization is when you buy a system that can scale out.
Yeah.
You never want to be in the position where you're utilizing 90% of the system that you have. You want to be maybe in the position where you're the adverse ratio of that, knowing you haven't outgrown it and that there's options associated with it. So I think the power that is coming from these like hyper-scaling, cloud-based AI platforms is a really good vehicle for that kind of stuff. I guess, is there any more, maybe you can't share this entirely, but I'm sure there's more people you're working with outside of Gemini and things of that nature. But I mean, is there pretty good runway for this type of technology? Do you see it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think the runway is, I've frankly never been more excited about the potential, that what we can do with metadata, what we can do with cloud-based solutions. I think there's a lot more willingness to send information or work with data on the cloud than it was when I first started in this industry. And we have better techniques and technology to get to that. So it's really, really fascinating, I think, when you start to just imagine the possibilities, I guess, of what are you trying to solve. And if there's a video scene that you have interest in, traditionally it's a security shot. I am covering the front entrances from a security perspective, but now I might have insight into our wheelchairs stacking up, by the entrance when they should be brought back somewhere else. And just the possibilities to then take a picture of that entrance and not impact security at all, and say, I have some more information that I need to ask some other system about to then take some action. I think it's really cool stuff.
And your passion does show. You're very passionate about what this is.
It's funny because it's like this under the hood piece of cameras that is often overlooked, that people don't even know. And that's why I said before, like, just the awareness that cameras are generating metadata. They're constantly looking at things, and there are easy ways now to get that data to work with other systems. And by easy, I mean it is possible. Takes some tech, like any project will. But yeah, we couldn't do this. Literally, we couldn't do the things we're seeing today a year ago.
No, it's fascinating. Well, I think we'll probably have to have you back on too as things continue to evolve in this space, because I'm sure there's going to be a fair amount more we want to cover.
For sure.
But again, Robert, thank you for being on. I think this was great. For the audience, thank you for listening in. Hopefully, we hope you found it valuable. If you find this kind of content, worthy of your time, there is most certainly more episodes available on the Access USA YouTube channel. So be sure to go check out those other podcasts, and stay tuned all. Thank you.
Thank you.